During a private jet flight in 1976, Elvis saw a little girl's drawing that made him stop everything. He spent the next 2 hours writing her a song, but he never got to finish it. 40 years later, that little girl returned to Graceland with her own daughter and discovered something in the archives that changed everything. It was March 14th, 1976, and Elvis was flying from Memphis to Los Angeles on his private jet, the Lisa Marie. He was exhausted, as usual. The medications were taking their toll. His divorce from Priscilla was finalized. He felt like he was going through the motions of being Elvis Presley without really being present. Linda Thompson, his girlfriend at the time, was sitting beside him. The cabin crew was quietly going about their duties. Elvis stared out the window, watching clouds pass by, lost in his own thoughts. Then, something caught his attention. Nancy Wilson, one of the flight attendants, was showing something to her colleague near the galley. Both women were looking at a piece of paper, and one of them was wiping tears from her eyes. Elvis unbuckled his seatbelt and walked over. "Ladies, is everything all right?" Nancy quickly tried to compose herself. "Oh, Mr. Presley, I'm sorry. We didn't mean to disturb you." "You're not disturbing me. What's wrong?" Nancy hesitated, then showed Elvis what they'd been looking at. It was a crayon drawing on white paper. The picture showed a little girl holding hands with a stick figure man in what looked like a military uniform. Above them, the sun was drawn with a sad face. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, it said, "Me and Daddy in heaven together." Elvis felt his chest tighten. "Who drew this?" "My niece Sarah," Nancy said quietly. "She's 7 years old. Her father, my brother, was killed in Vietnam 3 months ago. She drew this last week and gave it to me before this flight. She said she wanted me to show it to God so he'd know she's ready to come to heaven to be with her daddy." Elvis stood there, holding the drawing, tears forming in his eyes. "Where does Sarah live?" "Chicago, with my sister Rebecca. She's been struggling. Sarah won't speak anymore. She just draws pictures like this one." Elvis looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone on that plane. "Nancy, I need paper and a pen, and I need you to tell me everything about Sarah." For the next 2 hours, Elvis sat in the back of the plane, writing. He asked Nancy questions about Sarah, what she liked, what her father had been like, what made her smile before he died. Nancy told him that Sarah loved butterflies, that her father used to sing to her every night before bed, that Sarah's favorite color was purple, that she'd stopped wearing the butterfly necklace her father had given her because it made her too sad. Elvis wrote and crossed out lines. He hummed melodies. He asked Linda to help him find the right words. He was completely absorbed in creating something for a little girl he'd never met, who'd stopped speaking because her grief was too heavy for a 7-year-old to carry. "I'm writing her a song," Elvis told Nancy. "Something she can hold on to, something that tells her that her daddy's love didn't die with him, that it's still with her in every butterfly she sees, in every star at night, in every moment she remembers him." As Elvis wrote, the words came from somewhere deep. This wasn't a performance. This wasn't for an album or a concert. This was for a grieving child who needed to know that she wasn't alone. Elvis titled the song Butterfly Wings and began writing verses about a father's love that transcends death, about how the people we love never really leave us, about how a butterfly's wings carry messages from heaven. But as Elvis worked on the third verse, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Mr. Presley, we're beginning our descent into Los Angeles. Please return to your seat and fasten your seatbelt." Elvis looked down at the unfinished song. The third verse was incomplete. The bridge wasn't written yet. He'd run out of time. "Nancy," Elvis said urgently, "I need your sister's address. I'm going to finish this and send it to Sarah." Nancy wrote down the address. Elvis folded the drawing and his handwritten song pages carefully and put them in his jacket pocket. "I promise I'll finish this," Elvis said. "Tell Sarah that Elvis is writing her a special song and she needs to keep being brave until it's done. Can you do that?" Nancy nodded, crying. "Thank you, Mr. Presley. You have no idea what this means." But life got in the way, as it always did. Elvis got caught up in recording sessions, concert tours, health problems, and the chaos of being Elvis Presley. The unfinished song stayed in his jacket pocket and then in a drawer at Graceland, waiting to be completed. Elvis mentioned it occasionally to people in his inner circle. "I need to finish that song for the little girl," he'd say. But there was always something else demanding his attention. Another show, another crisis, another pill to take. On August 16th, 1977, Elvis Presley died at Graceland. The song was never finished. The promise was never kept. Sarah Mitchell grew up without her father and without the song Elvis had promised. Nancy had told her about Elvis writing something special for her on that plane, but Sarah never received anything. As a child, she'd waited by the mailbox every day for months. Nothing ever came. Sarah carried that disappointment along with her grief. She felt forgotten by God, forgotten by her father, and forgotten by Elvis Presley. But Sarah survived. She grew up, went to college, became a social worker specializing in helping children who'd lost parents in military service. She married, and in 2015, she had a daughter of her own. She named her Grace. Sarah rarely talked about her father or about Elvis's broken promise. It was too painful. But in March 2016, Sarah's mother Rebecca called her with an unusual request. "Sarah, Grace is turning 7 next month, the same age you were when your father died. I think it's time we made peace with some old ghosts. I want to take you and Grace to Memphis, to Graceland. I want you to see where Elvis lived. Maybe it will help you let go of some of that old hurt." Sarah was hesitant, but her mother was insistent. So in April 2016, 3 generations of women, Rebecca, Sarah, and 7-year-old Grace, traveled to Memphis and took a tour of Graceland. The tour was beautiful, but emotionally difficult for Sarah. Seeing where Elvis had lived and died, hearing stories about his generosity and his struggles, brought back all the complicated feelings she'd carried for 40 years. As the tour was ending, Grace tugged on Sarah's sleeve. "Mommy, can we see where Elvis made his music?" Their tour guide, hearing this, smiled. "The recording areas aren't part of the main tour, but let me see what I can do." The guide made a phone call, and a few minutes later, a woman from the Graceland Archives Department appeared. Her name was Patricia, and she'd worked in the archives for over 20 years. "I hear we have a special guest who wants to see the music areas," Patricia said warmly. "I can show you some of the archival storage where we keep Elvis's instruments and sheet music. Would that be interesting?" Grace's eyes lit up. "Yes, please." As they walked through the climate-controlled archives, Patricia explained how they preserved Elvis's legacy. Rows of carefully labeled boxes contained everything from concert costumes to personal letters to unreleased recordings. Grace was fascinated by everything. And then, in a section labeled Incomplete Projects 1976 to 1977, she stopped. "Mommy, what does incomplete mean?" "It means unfinished, sweetheart. Things Elvis started but didn't get to complete." Grace pointed to one box. "What's in that one?" Patricia checked the label. "Let's see. This contains sheet music and lyric fragments from 1976, things Elvis was working on that never became full songs." Sarah felt a strange pull toward that box. Could we look inside?" Patricia hesitated, then smiled. "Sure, why not? These are actually being digitized for the archive database this month anyway." She opened the box carefully. Inside were dozens of handwritten pages, Elvis's distinctive handwriting on yellowed paper, musical notations, crossed-out lyrics, ideas for songs that never came to be. Patricia began pulling out pages, explaining what each one was, and then she pulled out a sheet of paper that had been folded in half with something else folded inside it. When Patricia unfolded it, a child's crayon drawing fell out. A drawing of a little girl and a soldier, a sun with a sad face, the words, "Me and Daddy in heaven together." Sarah's heart stopped. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, reaching for the drawing with shaking hands. "That's mine. I drew that. I was 7 years old." Patricia looked confused. "I don't understand." Sarah's mother, Rebecca, stepped forward, tears already streaming down her face. "My husband died in Vietnam in 1975. Sarah drew that picture for my sister Nancy, who worked as a flight attendant on Elvis's private plane. Nancy showed it to Elvis during a flight in 1976. Sarah unfolded the paper that had been wrapped around her drawing. It was covered in Elvis's handwriting. At the top it said, "Butterfly Wings, for little Sarah." The page contained 2 complete verses and the beginning of a third. The lyrics were about a father's love living on through butterflies, about how every butterfly that landed near her was carrying a message from heaven, about how her daddy was always watching over her. The third verse was incomplete. Mid-sentence, the writing stopped. At the bottom of the page, Elvis had written, "Need to finish this. Sarah is waiting." Don't forget. Sarah sank to the floor, holding the drawing and the unfinished song, crying 40 years' worth of tears that had been waiting to fall. "He didn't forget me," Sarah sobbed. "He tried. He started writing it. He ran out of time." Little Grace sat down next to her mother, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing the importance of the moment. "Mommy, what is it?" Sarah showed her daughter the drawing she'd made 40 years ago. "When I was your age, my daddy died in a war. I was so sad that I stopped talking. And a very kind man named Elvis promised to write me a song to help me feel better. I thought he forgot about me. But he didn't forget. He just didn't get to finish." Patricia was crying now, too. "We've been preserving this for 40 years, and we never knew who Sarah was. Nobody knew the story behind it. We just knew it was important to Elvis because he'd written 'Don't Forget' at the bottom." Rebecca spoke up, her voice shaking. Is there any way Sarah could have this? The drawing is hers, and the song—" Patricia wiped her eyes. "I'll need to check with the estate, but I can't imagine they'd say no. This belongs to Sarah. It always did." 3 weeks later, Sarah received a call from Graceland. Not only could she keep the drawing and Elvis's unfinished song, but the estate wanted to do something more. They'd found a Nashville songwriter named Tom Mitchell, no relation to Sarah, just a coincidence, who'd grown up listening to Elvis and had a gift for capturing Elvis's musical style. The estate asked if Sarah would be comfortable with Tom studying Elvis's partial song and completing it in the style Elvis would have used. "We can't bring Elvis back to finish it," the estate representative said, "but we can honor his intention. He wanted you to have this song. We want to help make that happen." 2 months later, Sarah and Grace returned to Graceland for a private ceremony. In the same room where Elvis had once recorded, a session singer performed the completed version of "Butterfly Wings." The song incorporated every word Elvis had written, and Tom Mitchell had carefully crafted the completion to match Elvis's style and intent. The third verse finished the thought Elvis had started, and the bridge tied everything together with a message of hope and eternal love. When the performance ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. But the most powerful moment came when 7-year-old Grace, who'd been listening intently, turned to her mother and said, "Mommy, I think I understand now. When people love you, they never really leave. They stay in the butterflies." Sarah hugged her daughter and cried. 40 years ago, she'd been a 7-year-old girl who couldn't speak because her grief was too heavy. Now she was watching her own 7-year-old daughter understand something beautiful about love and loss. Butterfly Wings was never released commercially. It remains private, held in the Graceland archives with a special designation, personal work, completed posthumously at the request of the intended recipient. But the story of the unfinished song spread through the Elvis fan community and beyond. It became a symbol of something important. That kindness doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful, that incomplete gestures of love still matter, that promises kept 40 years late are still promises kept. Sarah Mitchell now works with Gold Star families who've lost military members in service. She shares her story and the story of Elvis's unfinished song with children who are grieving. "I tell them that it's okay if things feel incomplete," Sarah says. "Life is full of unfinished things, songs that don't get completed, promises that don't get kept in the timeline we expected, but that doesn't mean they weren't real. That doesn't mean they don't matter." Sarah keeps the original drawing and Elvis's handwritten lyrics framed in her office. Next to it is a photo of a butterfly and a simple plaque that reads, "Some of the most powerful gifts are the ones that remain incomplete. They remind us that love doesn't end. It just transforms." Tom Mitchell, the songwriter who completed Elvis's song, said in an interview, "When I was working on those final verses, I felt an enormous responsibility. This wasn't just any song. This was a promise made by Elvis Presley to a grieving child. Even though I was writing the words, they had to be what Elvis would have said. They had to carry his heart." The completed song ends with a verse that Sarah says feels like it came directly from both her father and from Elvis. "When you see a butterfly dancing in the air, know that love is with you, showing you it cares. Though I'm far away in that bright forever sky, I'm as close to you as every butterfly." Sarah's mother, Rebecca, now in her 80s, says the discovery of the unfinished song gave her family something they'd been missing for 40 years, closure and proof that Sarah hadn't been forgotten. "Elvis didn't get to keep his promise in the way he intended," Rebecca said, "but in a way, the fact that the song was unfinished made it even more meaningful. It showed that he'd tried, that Sarah had mattered to him. Sometimes the trying matters more than the completing." Grace, now 11 years old, has taken up butterfly conservation as a hobby. She says it's her way of honoring her grandfather she never met and the man who tried to help her mother heal. "My mom told me that Elvis didn't have to care about a little girl he'd never met," Grace said. "But he did care. He spent hours on a plane writing her a song. That tells me that everyone matters, even kids, even when we're sad. Someone's always paying attention." The story of butterfly wings reminds us that our incomplete kindnesses still have power. The song we meant to write but didn't finish. The letter we started but never sent. The promise we made but ran out of time to keep. These unfinished gestures of love don't disappear. They wait, sometimes for 40 years. And when they're finally discovered, they carry the same power they would have carried if they'd been completed on time. Elvis Presley died before he could finish Sarah's song. But the intention behind it, the hours he spent writing, the promise he made, the care he showed for a grieving child, lived on long after he was gone. And in 2016, when that child, now a grown woman with her own daughter, finally held the evidence that she hadn't been forgotten, the promise was completed in the only way that mattered. Not perfectly, not on time, but with love. And sometimes, that's enough. If this story of unfinished promises and enduring love moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to know that their incomplete acts of kindness still matter. Have you ever had an unfinished promise that was kept in an unexpected way? Let us know in the comments, and hit that notification bell for more true stories about love that transcends time.